I Am All Ears, a Ghost Fancast.
Hello, welcome to another episode of the I Am All Ears podcast. Today I'm joined with Nydelide. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
No problem. So since this is your first time, tell us how you got into Ghost.
Oh, okay. So it was in, I think, 2016 when they won the Grammy during Turtle.
Mm-hmm.
I was just, watching the Grammys and suddenly those like utter buffoons just arrive on stage and say one sentence of "Hello, we're Ghost," and I was like hooked. I was like, oh, that's good. So that's how it started.
Oh, and then you just sort of spiraled from there.
Kind of, yeah, because just after that, kind of after that, I listened to what was already out, and there was the Square Hammer video that just I saw that, and it was I think one of the first songs that I actually remember listening to, and I think I listened to it, paused at the end, squealed, and then put it back on.
Oh, it's always nice that I hear a lot of stories where it's Square Hammer as the start. I think it's a great intro song to the band.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So today we're going to be talking about some of the influences behind Ghost. Maybe only briefly touching on some of the musical influences, maybe a bit more of the pop cultural influences. And then obviously we've got the horror side, which we're going to see how we go on with this, because obviously the horror element is such a big thing that we might end up having to split this into two and just do a whole section on horror. But yeah, we're going to just have a little chat about that. So Tobias mentions in almost every interview about how he was brought up with a very liberal mother, and along with his older brother, he was surrounded with arts, culture. He always had the TV on and the radio on. He said that his mum took him to churches in a way that you would go visit a museum. But yeah, let's have a little dive into that. So, should we start with the music elements?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. So one of the things I've wrote down, which I think plays a big factor, is that Swedish folk music. He mentions on the Boo Crew podcast that obviously ABBA play a big influence to any musician that's Swedish, and he mentions that within ABBA song, a lot of people from outside of Sweden, they don't realize that there's a lot of Swedish folk music and to make ABBA sound the way they sound. So I guess there's like a pipeline of Swedish folk music, ABBA, ghosts that we probably don't necessarily pick up on, but it's obviously there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. There's the obviously, it's the big thing from Sweden, and I guess when you are, at least I don't know if it's the same for people that live in the US, but I know that when you are like in Europe and you have I don't know if it's the same for you for the UK, but I know for like Switzerland where I'm from, we don't have a lot of like, how do you say, big things, that are like very well known around. So when you have one, you like, in a way, you attach to it because you're like, proud, like, yeah, this, this is this is my thing for my country, and it represents us. And another side, you're like, every time you talk to people outside, they like only bring that back. So I feel like, in a musical sense, to like avoid going always in the same thing, you start and more like being analytic about it,
Yeah,
and I feel like
sure.
maybe Tobias, with the way he thinks, would obviously, music, he'll be like, okay, yeah, that's the thing, and then let's analyze it further.
Yeah, that makes sense. So obviously, he's got such a wide variety of musical influences. Like, obviously, he said he was brought up on a lot of stuff like Pink Floyd and Rolling Stones, but then obviously he grew up with a lot of punk. And then he started discovering death metal himself. And he's just got this really cool pot of things that he can pick influences from, which I find definitely shows within Ghost, because I always say to people when discovering Ghost, I was like, you can't listen to one album and judge them on that. There's something different for everyone in each album.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. That's a good thing. Like he expressed multiple times the thing that like kind of concept album, so he gives him the liberty to change between albums things so he can explore different things he wants to make. I think that's pretty great. You can see also something that I found very, very interesting is when you listen to people, what they say about Ghost, from like people online and also people I've talked to. The more metalheads tend to prefer the first two albums because you can obviously see that since Tobias before that had a lot of more heavier metal, that there's a bit of that is left.
Yeah.
And so you can see that a lot of more like I won't say intense, but people listen to more quote unquote aggressive metal. They tend to prefer the first two albums, and then after that they're like, yeah, less of my thing,
Yeah. A lot of metal elitists get really angry, being like, oh, the first two albums were so good, but then they just started doing all this pop shit. And I'm like, he's been writing stuff with that mindset for even since before Ghost. Like, it was always going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, if you don't like it, don't listen to it. No, that's fine. I mean, it's, listen to the first two albums. They're very good. Like, if you want to stay on that, cool, fine, good music.
And he's probably not actually going to be mad at that because I'm pretty sure he's mentioned even with like one of his favorite bands is Metallica, and I'm pretty sure said like anything sort of past the 90s, like after Load and Reload, was just kind of like ugh. So he says that about his own favorite bands as well. So I'm pretty sure he's not going to lie awake at night thinking about it.
No, I don't think so. Also, I think the fact he's not, like I said many times, he's not really on social media or stuff, which he's got his reasons. But I think it's in a way, a good thing because then like he doesn't have to see some of the, let's be honest, bad side.
Yeah.
There's some comments of people that just want to spread hate, which I don't think it will affect him that much, but still, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, especially because a lot of at least there are some constructive comments, and I'm like, okay, I can kind of see where they're coming from, whilst I don't agree. But then there's some that are just based off pure misinformation or pure lack of understanding. Like they'll say something, they'll make a claim about the band, and it's like, if you were a fan, you'd know that's not correct whatsoever. Or like people will say, oh, they're just ripping off this band, this band, this band, and then if you actually listen, it's like, no, there's just a coincidence. Or like I think with Ritual, there was a comment about it sort of ripping off I think it's Megadeth's Sympathy for the Devil. Not Sympathy for the Devil, Symphony of Destruction.
Yes.
And but Tobias has come out and said that was just coincidental and not an influence whatsoever. He's actually not a very big Megadeth fan whatsoever. So again, if you know anything about the band, you know that these claims are not true.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's also a thing where I'm starting my journey to create my own music, and it's always a bit stressful when you're an artist. At least for me, it is to you kind of afraid to be too influenced, and at some point making some sort of copy, even if you're not trying to. There's also the fact that at some point, with all the music that came out, things are bound to sometimes be similar, because like I'm not gonna say everything has been made, but kind of. So yeah, some things are similar. But also I saw someone that one day made a comment that was like, I don't see why you saying that. They were saying like, I don't like I used to listen to Ghost, but I don't like Tobias because I think he's like very diva like and very like I don't know, like selfish and stuff. I was like, where do you see that in
Man
the
is nothing but
interviews or
humble.
stuff? Yeah, I'm like, where does that like? Tell me, I'm really interested and curious. What makes you say this? Because it's just the guy. Every time you see him on an interview, he's like very humble and very like when people ask him, oh, now that you've reached like success and stuff, and he's always like, that's nice. I'm glad it happened, and he's not just like, I knew it would happen. Like everything was set up for it and stuff. So I was like, I was very surprised with that comment. I was like, no.
No, exactly. I mean, look at what happened at the Swedish Grammy Awards the other day, where he brought all his producers up on stage to thank those and made sure they got the recognition. Like that's a lot. Not a lot of people would do that. They'd like to take the credit themselves.
Yeah, and you can see even during the rituals, which I can only talk about in videos because it will be my first ritual this year. And you can see on stage, like he's doing his things, but he's always interacting with the people which he basically hired to play music, So even so, he like doesn't have to or anything, but he still does it. And at the end, he presents them, and during he presents them, and he's like, he seems to be very aware that music isn't created by one person. And so yeah, he's always like you said, presenting people around him and being very humble and seemingly very aware of who does what and what importance they have. So yeah.
And going back to what you said about when you're writing your own music and you're kind of worried about copying things. I mean, obviously we've just had that. I think Ed Sheeran just had that case, which he's just won about something being very vaguely similar. And obviously, I think it was Marvin Gaye was trying to take him to court, and obviously he's lost. But I think it was. I want to say it was the interview with Daniel P. Carter where Tobias was talking about at the end of the day, there's only a certain amount of notes in a certain amount of patterns that work together. So eventually things are going to start coming back up again that are similar. And it's actually quite interesting because by the time this episode comes out, Phantomine will have dropped. But as we're recording right now, we're still waiting for it to drop. But an interview came out yesterday where he says that he's kind of paid a little homage to Metallica's Fade to Black in Phantom of the Opera. At the minute, like I said, we haven't heard it, but by the time this comes out, we will have. So I don't know to what extent he's, whether he's did a straight up sample or whether he's kind of made it his own. But yeah, I was going to say, like, he's obviously like not afraid to regurgitate some things within there as well.
No, for sure. And you can see in like other well-known bands, like for example, we know that Mariana Cross got very famous on TikTok, and there's another song that got very famous on TikTok, like kind of the same time, which was Zone from Rammstein.
Yeah.
And for example, in that song, the chorus behind is a sample from something else.
Mm-hmm.
So you can definitely, I think, you have to see the legal thing, but I think it's not a bad thing to sometimes sample some stuff, like all the stuff, and you get inspired, and yeah, like I said, there's this amount of notes that exist and this amount of kind of composition, and at some point, some stuff are gonna kind of sound the same,
I think what I like about Tobias as well is he's very open about it. Like I'm pretty sure I can't remember what song it was, but he's straight up said like, "Oh yeah, I took that from this," or "Yeah, I took that from this," or "This is straight up Pink Floyd," or "This is straight up Metallica." Like he doesn't be like, "Oh no, I came up with this idea all by myself." Like he will just straight up say his influences.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to keeping on with the sort of musical influences while we've discussed sort of the sound. I'm going to briefly gloss over the visual side of things. Again, not going to delve too deep into the horror side of things because the bands I'm about to mention kind of go hand in hand with it. But you can also see there's a lot of influence with the visuals with bands like obviously Kiss is a big one that he mentions all the time. Alice Cooper, sort of the death metal scenes with the corpse paints, King Diamond. Yeah, that is something that is very, very big with Ghost.
Yeah, I mean, sure. He seemed to be, which is something that, again, I can like only talk about my point of view. But he talked a lot about how he wants the show to be really a show. So those influences make sense, because also, again, my point of view, when you go to see a show live, like, I'm personally not a fan of bands that will just straight up play their song and do kind of nothing on stage, because then you can just listen to the music at home and probably have it in better quality, you know.
Mhm.
So yeah, the idea of making a show, you know, adding stuff, and I think with the lore also it makes sense to continue that on stage. So yeah, and he talks about in the future wanting, I think he was more talking about the structural or thing, but he wanted to be able to play in big outside arenas, kind of like Rammstein, just to have more space and freedom to add stuff to the show, you know. Which,
He's
imagine Ghost with pyrotechnic would be so nice.
Yeah, I was gonna say he's gonna blow all the budget on pyrotechnics.
Yeah, it's like there's fireworks everywhere.
I've spoke about this before as well. Have you seen like how Alice Cooper does some of the stunts on stage with the guillotine and the hang rope?
Yes.
I was gonna say I've always joked about with obviously where we're coming up to the end of the Impera album cycle and everyone's worried about Cardinal and how he's gonna go. We were saying like as much as it would be a little bit traumatizing, how cool it would be if we had like an Alice Cooper moment on stage.
Yeah. I think that would be nice. But in a way, kind of. That's what was happening with Nihil for Miasma, you know, bringing him back, shockwaves and stuff.
Yeah,
um,
I'd like them to do more of that.
yeah, that would be nice. That would be nice. Bring some of the lore on the stage.
Well, it's funny because obviously they've just released yeah, like when this is out, Pantomime will have been released, and obviously over in England we've got pantomimes, which are very theatrical, very campy. And imagine if like Ghost did a pantomime like with like characters on stage and you know maybe even bits of dialogue and monologues and stuff.
Full on theater kid moment on stage.
Well, speaking of theatrics, obviously one of the influences I have wrote down is Phantom of the Opera, which somehow I hadn't seen until Tobias mentioned it so much. Obviously, I knew about it, and my best friend, she's been begging me to go see it with her because it's her favorite musical ever. But I've only watched the Royal Albert Hall recording of it. But yeah, you can. When I even just watching the Royal Albert Hall recording, you can definitely see where he's taken influence from that show.
Yeah, that's the moment where I'm gonna be. You can send me messages and tell me I'm a pile of shit, but I didn't see it either. Which again, I have like, don't know, like 90% of my friend who wants to basically hang me on the public place for that. But I've seen some visuals of it. I kind of know the basic because obviously it's such a famous thing. It's like some movies, you know, you cannot know kind of some things, and I've seen a bit of it because it's so famous, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can definitely see where it's coming from. And I think that's a very like great influence. Like if you could choose any influence that to have, I can definitely see Tobias like seeing it and being like, oh wow. You know, coming out all excited, like doing the steps, like yay, I see him.
I would like to see like in how obviously the Phantom has got like the half mask and obviously where Tobis kind of said like he's struggling on stage a little bit with you know the heat or like being able to sing through the mask. I think a Phantom of the Opera style mask for Papa 5 would be kind of cool.
Yeah, that would be nice. Or maybe if like Copia becomes the Antichrist, as some theory says, like a
Yeah.
half demon face mask, you know,
Yeah, like
that'd be so nice.
yeah, because the Phantom like you've got the white kind of almost angelic face that's hiding mask rather that's hiding you know this disfigured
The
face and what
scar
if it's like
dispersion, yeah.
the what if it's the opposite? You've got Copia's beautiful face. Yes, we think he's beautiful.
Yes.
Come for us. But maybe he's got like a gruesome demon mask on top of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that'd be interesting.
That would be cool. Tobias, if you're listening, please consider this option.
Yes, I'll make you some designs if you want. I can draw. By the time these come out, and if we are right and something like that happens, we called it.
Yeah,
Just saying.
exactly. Yeah, so talking about actors and sort of theatrics and stuff, I find it really interesting about how a lot of the masks and costuming for the papas, in fact, especially the faces, are based on sort of actors. Like you see Copian, that's straight up Vincent Price, and then you see Terzo, and that's Bela Lugosi. I'm wondering if there's going to be another actor for Papa 5 who is the main source of influence behind the face.
Good question. Yeah, I guess. I guess so. That'd be nice. But I mean, also, I think with influences like Tobias has watched a lot of movies, like you say, like TV was on, radio was on when he was younger. So you can definitely see in the influences that he chose for the previous Papa, you can see the exactly what inspires him. That mixed between like frightening but also attracting charisma, and like that strange, eerie, beautiful in a strange way. That you're like drawn to it. Like as a big old movie fan, when I saw the references, which I kind of picked on for some of them, I was like, oh yes, those are good influences. I was like, yeah, I like the actors, I like the papa, I have issues, yay, I like old men.
Oh, that's all of us. But yeah, I mean,
Yes.
going with the movie thing, I mean, look at the ghouls, like the current ghouls. Obviously, those and he straight up said this, that obviously one of the big influences for the current ghoul costumes was the Tusken Raiders from Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, fucking nerd.
Yeah. I mean, it's obvious as a nerd, but also I like, obviously, like the goals. You can see the progress in budget for the costume, which is nice. But also, as much as I loved the previous Cardinal Copia era with the old mask, but new with the cutout for the mouth, like unmuzzle Sodo, I want to see his tongue again. I think with the new one, it's, well, there was that all that theorizing about the ghouls are dressed for war and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
And for me, when I saw the costume, was just like bugs. They look like bugs. I love
They
it.
do look
I
like little
love it.
bugs.
Yeah, I mean, it's creature, like a creature definition picture of a ghoul. It's so like that, and I kind of miss the little blue capes. Even if I understand that they were like a
Yeah.
struggle on stage, I kind of missed the capes.
Yeah. They were serving in those.
Yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful.
Well, I guess this kind of ties in loosely, when you said about them going to war. Terzo's sort of black and white suit that he used to wear on stage was actually influenced by the Swedish king Gustav III, and sort of one of his uniforms that he used to wear. So again, but there's a lot of Swedish influence, especially in the Papa regalia that he wears for, the big blue one that he wears for like Call Me Little Sunshine and in photo shoots and stuff. If you look on the coat, there's like the Swedish coat of arms. I think there's the Linköping coat of arms as well, or something to do with Linköping. I think it's a lion. As well, obviously a little 666 in there, which would make sense. But it's funny because like even though like Papa as a character is meant to be Italian, it's nice that he still throws in these little Swedish influences in there.
Yeah, it reminds me of the famous. You can find those videos of Terzo online. Is it like we're Italian? Like I don't speak Swedish, and then cut frame at another show, and he speaks full Swedish on stage. I'm like, that's cool.
You so light, sir. He does that though. He'll say something. I mean, it's like that one clip where he's like, "I remember this song." No, I don't. I was
No,
never
I
there.
don't.
Fuck.
Exactly. So cute. Every time you get it, you're like, oh, you.
Oh, he's trying to keep up with his own continuity.
Yeah, but I mean, you can see that there's some. I don't know if there's some videos, but I know there's some people who talks about like loopholes and some incontinuity and some mistakes that sometimes they make. And I mean, when you look at the law as like funny and unserious as it is, it's still law, so you can't remember everything.
Yeah, it's and I actually said this on another episode. I said the continuity errors actually make it fun and funny.
Yeah, and it like shows us that I think it adds to the lore is serious, but also not that serious. You know, it adds to the Tobias doesn't take the lore as doesn't seem to take the law as seriously because he's not like taking notes and he doesn't have you know the meme and the gif, you know, the billboard with the strings and the guy with the office outfit and it's like
Oh yeah.
law, you know. I don't think he does that. He's more like of I have that idea. That'd be nice. Does it work? Yeah, kinda. Okay, good.
Yeah, close enough. One of the things I've wrote down is the humor element with Ghost and the influences that came behind those. I know he said that he's really inspired by people like Richard Pryor, Monty Python, Benny Hill, and Eddie. What's his name? What's the guy's name who is Donkey in Shrek?
Oh,
Why have I
oh,
forgot
damn.
this?
Suddenly I have brain hole.
Let me Google.
Oh, this is very bad.
He's one of my favorite actors as well when I was a kid, so why don't I know this?
Freddie Murphy?
Eddie Murphy, there we go.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so like, you know, he's very inspired by comedy and also I feel like he grew up on a lot of British TV shows as well as American obviously, but like obviously especially because he grew up on Punk, there's a lot of British humor in there and
Yeah.
he has obviously taken that sort of cheeky piss takey attitude and is throwing it into Ghost, which I absolutely love because I feel like it just shows that, you know, there's a level of humor and a lot of fun to be had with this band. It's not all just very because there's quite a few bands that do similar sort of things in terms of lyrical content and thematics that Ghost do, but they take it quite seriously and quite deep and dark and blah blah blah. But then next minute you with Ghost you're seeing a phantasm shitting in a car. But
I'm
yeah,
just now
God, I love
the
it.
new theory. I'm just waiting for Copia to be killed on stage by a white rabbit. If you got the reference, you're a good one. Um, that'd be pretty funny.
I really want if they are gonna like go with the we're gonna kill Copia thing rather than, you know, do something where he just kind of steps out. I really want the death to be fucking hilarious, like
Yeah,
something completely unexpected and almost humorous. So I mean, it would soften the blow as well, I guess. But like, I don't know.
slipped on a banana and broke his neck. Oh, shoot.
Yeah. So before I move on to potentially talking about some other stuff, is there any influences you want to bring up?
Well, I know that in one interview that I've listened to quite recently, someone asked Tobias, "How do you, you know, keep up when you're on tour and stuff? How do you stay motivated and stuff?"
Mm-hmm.
And he explained how he got an advice from a footballer, so a football player, um, for other friends as a soccer player. um, and that told him like when you have time, watch a video of what motivated you, what gave you the will to get where you're at. And he explained that he was watching videos from Queen
Mm.
performances. And I can definitely see that, like, you know, the thrill, but also the way obviously, you know, Queen, big thing,
Mm.
and you can see stuff that also he talked about before that, where he talked about how with the crowd you want to have an interaction, you know, like kind of love making. So you want to, you know, give something to the crowd and the crowd give it back to you. And you can definitely see that when you look at Queen shows, like Freddie Mercury just played the crowd like an instrument, was incredible.
Mm.
Um, and I can definitely see where the motivation could come from when you're feeling a bit more down, or when he's feeling a bit more like, tired or stuff, like, watching that and being like, yes, that's what I wanted. I remember watching that back in the days, and that's what I wanted. So I think it's also a good and pretty big influence that he had.
I think I remember him saying as well, that's when you see those shots of him and the ghouls that are all huddled together before they go on stage, that's the kind of thing they talk about, like, this is the reason why we're here, this is what we wanted, remember that this is our dream, sort of thing, just to, like, because at the end of the day, whilst I've not been on tour myself, I've heard how, like, tiring and, obviously it takes up a big part of your life, and you're away from family and whatnot. But at the end of the day, this is your life dream. And sometimes you just need that little reminder that, yeah, you might be struggling, but, at the end of the day, you are living your dream.
Yeah, you're there. You used to watch that back in days and be like, one day, I hope that's me. And then you're there and you're like, wow, that's me.
Yeah. I get so emo as well when I see, like, little clips from Repugnant shows, and then suddenly I'm seeing, like, clips from Hellfest, and there's just thousands and thousands of people outside, and the
Yeah.
difference. It's like, oh.
Yeah, for sure. And the way he talked about how when he did Repugnant, he thought that was going to be the big thing.
Mm.
And I also liked his honesty when he talks about when, like, he wanted also kind of the fame, he wanted the thing to succeed. Well, a lot of other artists will be like, "Oh, I did it just for the arts," and you can feel behind that. No, you also wanted some of the fame.
Yeah.
And where he talks very, very freely about that, and in a very strangely humble way too. And to see that he was like, Repugnant was going to be my thing, and he tried, and it didn't work.
Mm.
And then after that, he tried making some more rock popular, music with. I have a blank.
Yeah, Subvision.
Yes, Subvision. And that didn't work. And now to see, that, yay, Ghost worked, that's so nice. And you can also find in that the influence of obviously Ghost worked before that, but now you can see a lot of the newer fans that are coming because Marion Cross like exploded on TikTok.
Mm.
So in a way, also the time period, I think it's just a big whole complicated puzzle that's luckily fit together. Like you have the pieces and you bring the pieces to the table, and maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Maybe you missing the famous last piece in the middle of the puzzle. um, but yeah, so that's very nice. And when we're talking about inspiration, that's one of the big inspiration that I have for my own music. That's, sometimes it doesn't work, and you can try and try and try. And if you're lucky and you work hard enough and you believe in what you do, maybe it will work. And if it does, it will be very nice.
Yeah. It was also really interesting how he spoke about, and I've definitely experienced this with some things that have happened in my own life, where he mentioned obviously he was doing everything he can with sort of Repugnant and Subvision, and then obviously he had a family and had to get a job, and he just said, okay, I'm going to do this as a hobby and just see what happens and let it all kind of flow naturally. And then that's when things took off, rather than when he was like, proper busting and grinding and begging for it to happen. It's funny how it is. Sometimes that is the case for people, but God, I bet. I'm glad it's happened to him, but he's chuffed to bits. Like at the end, like where he thought he had to quit and give up, that it still happened
Mhm.
for him.
Yeah, and that's the moment where we're all gonna thank Bowl to be so supportive and be like, you have an idea, do it, go for it, because without the Queen, maybe you wouldn't have Ghosts. So thank you.
Queen Bee, we love you.
Yes.
Going quickly back to some of the Swedish influences, and also the sort of hardships of touring. I remember when he was talking about when he gets off stage and he'll just put on Um, a lot of Swedish music. I can't remember the guy's name, but he's kind of like the Swedish equivalent of Michael Bolton, and just listen to cheesy Swedish pop just while he's taking off his makeup and unwind and just have a bit of downtime to himself. And I just need to see that for myself, to be honest, because it sounds very calming.
The equivalent of us putting Careless Whisper.
Exactly. Oh,
Which I
okay.
actually enjoy listening to once in a while. And I vibe on it way too much.
Oh, I fucking love Wham.
Yeah, it's so good.
All right. I think we've got quite a bit of time that we can now talk about horror films because I know this is a big, big thing.
Yeah.
So before we go on to necessary horror films, kind of tying in with the horror theme, keeping it a bit more real life, I want to bring up Jack the Ripper, and especially now that Impera has been released, and obviously Respite and the Spitalfields is about Jack the Ripper, but in the Morbid podcast where he literally spoke for about 13 minutes about Jack the Ripper, but he kind of uses these true crime and serial killer events that have actually taken place in history for inspiration.
Yeah, the guy's a total nerd, which I understand. True crime lover right here.
Yeah.
But you can see, yeah, in that particular podcast, you like the hyperfixation of I research everything and I have my theories and I'm sure that's that guy, like I'm sure like because of that and you can just see that when he got some time alone, he's like true crime stories, listening and being like taking notes, and being like, that doesn't make sense.
I wonder if he's like my dad. My dad is really obsessed for some reason with the Fred and Rose West cases, and he's literally got books that are annotated. He's got like sticky notes in them. He's written in them, and he's convinced that he's cracked the case, or almost cracked the case. That's why he's not come forward with it. But yeah, I don't know. But I can see Tobe doing the same thing.
Oh yeah, probably. Also because he seems very interested in all the psychological and background of um famous serial killer. Like he talked about it a lot. Like there seems to be a repetition and stuff. Which is also I think that Tobias thinks a lot about stuff in a very analytic and intellectual sense of doing it. Um, because you can see in various different times he talks about backgrounds and his own backgrounds. Like he said sometimes, like that he had to transcend to another person because there was no way that someone from like his background and the way he like small place he lived could become the rock star that he is. And you can hear in that podcast he's like talking many times about backgrounds and logics and there's repetition. There's like that typical male in that typical background in that typical kind of place with that typical mentality that has like you can recognize a lot of serial killers that come from that. Which I think is it's very interesting, but it's also a good way to, how could I say, get interested in a healthy way, to be more intellectual about it. Because for me, at least, who's a big fan of true crime, when you are in that universe, you can clearly see the difference between people who take it as an interesting subject and like talking about facts and talking about like very intellectual things, sorry, and the people who get emotionally invested. And I guess that I feel like getting emotionally invested is end up being in a way very unhealthy in that
Yeah, for
subject,
sure.
because obviously it's talking about people who's done horrible things, for horrible reasons. And when you get too emotionally invested in it, you just end up like either you are just disgusted by the world, which is kind of sad, or you like have issues. With people have issues because of that. So that's very interesting to see how his mind work when he talk about it. But yeah, the guy's a nerd and loves that. You can feel it.
Yeah, because I feel like if you immerse yourself, like you say, around a certain, especially a subject like that where there is horrible things involved, sometimes you don't realize you're being influenced by these things. So you don't want to submerge yourself too much that, like I said, you may not go out and kill someone, but you know, you start having these little tendencies or like traits that you've maybe picked up on. But I think he's smart enough to, like you say, have the intellectual rationing of seeing like, oh, okay, so he did it like this because the psychology behind it was this and this, rather than, you know, just completely absorb it all.
Mhm.
One of the people I've also brought up as well was Aleister Crowley. If you can
Yeah.
see, there's quite a few photos. There's a promotional photo where he's kind of against the white wall with his hand almost doing like a devil pose, and the shadows kind of mimicking that. That is a very famous Aleister Crowley picture. On if you're listening on YouTube, I'll pop the image up on YouTube. If not, just Google it. And then also, obviously, the front cover of Impera is mimicking a very famous Aleister Crowley picture as well. But yeah,
Yeah.
obviously he's very like influenced by the occult and, you know, things like that.
Yeah. I mean, of course. And like he talked about a lot, he was influenced by lots of different media when it comes to visual sounds, anything, you know, like they say movie, radio, books and stuff. And when you know, search deeper, when you get hyper focused on something, and all the neurospicy people will understand, you like you search, you dig to the deep end of it, and you're like, I want to know everything. This is my personality for the next 6 months. And so you're like, I can kind of see him doing something like that.
You just know full well he was like, right, okay, this album's going to be about empires, and he spent about 6 weeks watching every documentary under the sun.
Oh yeah, like, you know, just in like at 3 a.m. while waking up, coming out the stairs and be like, what are you doing? And like at
So
2 centimeters from the TV, we're like, I need to know.
that's why he makes the thematical albums. It's just so he can have an output for his hyperfixation.
Yeah, like the hyperfixation doesn't consume him; he consume it and make
And
it
he's
into
making,
something.
and
We
now we've
bring
all
back
got to
body.
consume it. All right, so let's go on to the biggie next. So let's talk about horror movies. Obviously he's mentioned a lot of the classics like Jaws, The Shining, a lot of Stanley Kubrick films, and he's kind of shat on any of the. Again, this is so typical him because he talks about, like the same with music, about sort of anything past 93 is basically dog shit. And yeah, he says the same with horror films. So, but I kind of agree. I really agree with him on this because I always thought I hated horror films because I've grown up with just the ones that are just jump scares. And with as someone who has like anxiety, a chemical imbalance that causes anxiety, where like, you know, one little jump scare can set me off for a week and it takes me ages to come down. I just thought I was allergic to them, like literally. So when I went back and was like, oh, there's these horror films that have stories and like plots and actual calm moments, like it changed my outlook on it because I was like, okay, this is so much better. But yeah, in terms of Ghost, you can definitely see, you know, some of the. I mean, there's straight up references on some of the T-shirts, the album artworks. Yeah, like let me pull up the thing you sent me the other day.
The research. That's my hyper focus.
Yeah,
Horror
I love
movies.
it. Let me
But yeah,
find
and
it.
also he talks about the fact that like, because you know he was very free in his home and the way he was raised, that he would, like, his mom would bring him to those good old, if you are young you will not understand, but the good old video stores, where you can like borrow films, movies, and stuff.
Mhm.
In the old cassettes that most of the times were not rewind before, so you had to spend 15 minutes rewinding it before you can watch it anyway.
Yep.
And like his mom would be like, he can take, anything. He was like, yay, no limits. So let's take all the 18 plus horror movies, which turned out making him afraid of the dark. But in another way, I think it's a good thing, because that's basically what happened, like what I did. I can recognize myself in that, because I think the first horror movie I saw was Halloween, the first one, the old one, the OG.
Okay.
Which now my favorite franchise. Something Halloween come out and be like, yay!
I bet
um,
I bet you were so happy when Ghosts were doing the music for the new one.
Yes. So when they came out with Hunter's Moon, I went to the movie theater and watched the movie, because obviously, Halloween, I had to watch it. And I was the only moron who basically stayed behind to watch the credits just so I could listen to the song. And I was like, yay! Getting excited in my seats by myself. But anyway, I came out of that sounds very giddy, and I was like, yay! That was nice. Um,
Oh,
but also because as something he talked about when it comes to like horror influence and stuff, in Europe we got Halloween, like not the movie but the celebration, the holiday. uh I don't want to say kind of late, but just we got it after, because it was coming with the US products that we were getting, the movies, the food, everything, the
mm,
commercial side. And it's arrived, and I was born during the moment where it was at its peak in Europe. So I
yeah.
was born in Halloween celebration and stuff, and I lived to see its death, because now it's less of a thing. And that's unfair, because life got me addicted to Halloween celebration and then took it away.
Oh.
Yeah, that's so sad. So now I'm trying to revive it, but yeah, so when you believe in that and you um obviously get interested to the movies. And one of the big thing that I personally enjoyed when I watched Halloween was, then obviously it's a slasher, so you watch the other slashers and you're like, oh, Friday the 13th, nice. And then you like Nightmare on Hill Street, and then you like Chucky, and you're like, oh,
Mm,
this is, yeah. And at some points there was a downfall where the movies kind of went comedic. And
yeah.
then, like you said, when the movies that were coming out when we were at the age of watching those kind of movies, there was a lot of that screamer vibe. That's also I dislike.
Mm.
Mostly because, like you, I don't like to be surprised. That's the control freak in me. Who's like, I don't like losing control of my body, and I don't like to jump. So,
For
um,
sure.
yeah, that's awful. And yeah, I agree that movies at that period were like, you know,
Yeah.
not there was nothing really interesting. It was a lot of screamer, or a lot of very, very long and tedious things. There were a few, like for example, for screamers, personally, I like to see them, but not in horror movies, but in movies like thrillers or stuff like that, where you don't expect them, because then they have a sense, They're
Yeah.
not a cheap trick to like, haha, I made you jump, so you scared. No.
Mm.
Um, like for example, I don't know if you watched the movie called Seven.
I
Um,
haven't no.
there's a not a screamer but a jump scare in it, but it's very
Yeah.
effective, and you should actually watch that movie. It's very good movie. But in like those kind of movie, yeah, it makes sense. But in the movie that came out in early 2000 and stuff, it was a bit. But I feel that now there's a lot of good horror movies that are coming out, because I'm saying a lot. I'm talking about a subgenre of movie, so that's not really a lot. It's a lot when you think about horror movies.
Yeah.
So yeah, a few that come out now that try to make you live an experience and have a story and stuff. Like I don't know if you saw Nope or Get Out, which are by the same person, which they're just good movies.
Yeah.
There's a story, there's subject, there's something that they're trying to say with the movie, and they work, which would like to know what Tobias think of some of those movies that come out now. Because like, is it just being um a 40-year-old guy being like, no, I don't like what is new.
Back in the good old days.
When I was younger, it was better. Now you all have your technology and your like social medias and.
One thing I do relate to him on is watching some horror films way too early. Like my dad was really into horror, and he got me watching. I think like one of the first. I think my first horror movie was The Exorcist, and I was like 6 years old. And my dad's a bastard, right? And I mean this in the very funniest way. I call him a bastard jokingly. He, the bit where there's the priest that's walking down the street, and then my dad was sitting there, and he was like, "Okay, don't blink." And I was like, "Why?" And then there's that big fucking face that just jumps out of nowhere for no reason. It's just there.
Yeah.
The one, I think Tobe's got a patch of it on one of his jackets. Yeah, that traumatized me. And then he made me watch The Omen not too long after. So again, I was like 6, and it's funny because we didn't grow up in a religious household whatsoever. Yet for some reason, I was then suddenly scared of like possessions and like that I was gonna be like taken over by the devil, which is ironic now, given the devil can take over me any day now.
Yeah, now you want to be taken by the devil.
Yeah, now I'm like, bitch, come at me, please. Especially if it's Copia as the Antichrist.
Yeah, of course.
I was talking about like getting fucked up as well by horror films. It made me laugh when Tobias said that he's scared of clowns, given that like what he does for a living.
Yeah, but there's actually a very logical reason as to why people are scared of clowns, and it mostly comes out to when you're a child, which is funny because I used to be afraid of clowns, and now I have a clown kink. So yeah, a lot of road being gone too. But anyway, it's actually there's someone that I found very interesting who explained that why children are afraid of clowns. It's kind of the same as why children are afraid of vampires, but it's because of the makeup. Everything in clowns is when you talk about instincts, red flags. So like the pale skin, the red lips, the disproportionate thing, the weird antics and stuff. It in a brain of a child which works a lot more by instincts. Those are all signs that that person is visibly sick, unwell, and should not be approached because as a instinct you don't want to get sick. So that's a very interesting thing I've learned later in life. That's why a lot of children very young are afraid of clowns. It's because self-protection instincts are like that. Do not go to that person. That person had the plague. Like, do not.
That's really
Um,
interesting. I never knew that.
yeah, I found that very interesting. And when you think about it, makes sense. Like a lot of the things that with clown makeup and stuff, it's just not natural. And as I'm going to say children, but more like toddlers, when you're very young, your brain works just with instincts and self-preservation. So when you see someone that is by all the logical thinking of your brain not well, you're not going to go to that person. And if that person comes to you, you're going to run away and cry and call mom and be like, go away. So yeah, it does make sense. And then after that, when it's childhood trauma and stuff, then it stays. Fear stays.
I am Lia's podcast bringing you science.
Yes.
We have actual science here, people. We're doing something right. I do always wonder though, because he said obviously it extends past clowns and sort of onto people with painted faces in general. Because obviously like at the rituals we're all just like painting our faces. I wonder if he just looks out into the crowd and is just shitting up by all of us, like staring at him with like a sea of people with painted faces.
He just came out and he's like, "Oh no, not again."
Why?
What he sees in his nightmares are just fans.
So I'm going on some. I've brought up this little thing that you've sent me of the album covers and their horror movie influences. So we've got Opus Eponymous with Salem's Lot. Is that by Stephen King?
I have doubt. I don't know.
Oh, it's okay. So we've got Salem's Lot. You got Infestissimum with Amadeus. And then if you have Ghost, there's obviously the clear Nosferatu picture. Cerise, you've got Silence of the Lambs, and Meliora, you've got like the very Metropolis vibes. And then there's also a bunch of other artworks that you see. I mean, I want to do a whole episode on merch and their kind of thing because there's just so much to get into. But just like one of the classic examples is there's the Here's Papa t-shirt with The Shining and the Jaws reference one and the Clockwork Orange one. There's so many horror. I mean, a lot of the t-shirts nowadays as well are drawn by fans who are also horror fans. So that's obviously why you see a lot of these references in there. But obviously, some of the earlier stuff when it was a little bit more controlled by the band, you can see the horror movie influences in the merch so clearly and like in the promos and stuff.
Mhm. Yeah, and you can see that going back to Halloween the movie, I think there was a point where Tobias explained how it was like to get asked to make the music for Halloween Kills, and we came out with Hunter's Moon, such a good song. And he explained how it was a very interesting take on so many of things that he enjoys and that we talked about. First of all, the franchise of the movie, which he liked. Also the true crime aspects, like getting into the mind of a killer,
Yeah.
And so I think he explained it was something that was very freeing in a creative sense.
Yeah.
And you can kind of see that. I've seen a lot of people actually complain that the track was on the album.
Yeah.
Which I can kind of understand because it true, it kind of feels out of place in a way. Because you can see that when he wrote that, it was you can hear that when he wrote that, he was in a different creative process, a different headspace,
Yeah. He was writing
Which,
for the film as sort of rather than
yeah,
writing for the album.
yeah. And obviously, I have the vinyl because I collect vinyls.
Yeah.
I'm in a way, I feel like I'm also sometimes a 40-year-old trapped in a 25-year-old body. I'm like, I like old stuff. Definitely not born in the right time, but yeah, in a way, I can understand that because when I listen to that song, I listen to it unless it's on my phone. I listen to it on the vinyls, and I don't listen to it on my full album vinyl, but I listen to it on a small single album of Hunter's Moon that I've purchased.
Yeah.
Because it feels like its own thing. Also because on the other side there's the original soundtrack of Halloween, and I it's such a good one. And you put it on and you have like the crickling thing of the texture of the vinyl, and you're like, yes, I am
Yes,
back in the 70s.
I know, like I've got into arguments with people before about this. Like people are like, "Why do you listen to vinyl when you got like crackling and all sorts of stuff when like Spotify it's all clear and I'm like, yeah, but that's the point. It's meant.
Yeah.
I like the crackle.
Yeah, it makes you first of all, it makes you travel in time. I don't know for you if it's the same, but for me, it makes me
Very
travel to my time.
nostalgic.
It makes me travel to a time I've never known, like.
I fully get that. Yeah.
And also because it's texture, and that's something actually I talked about with my brother. And I told him, like, I set up the vinyl player and I'm like listening to vinyl. I love the little crackling song. And he was like, yeah, the sound default. I was like, the way you call that just make me mad. Yes, I know it is sound default, but it makes it charming, okay?
Yeah.
Because in a way, when you listen to music on Spotify, on YouTube, on your phone, it's so not that I don't like it, but it's so like clean. It's too clean.
It's too perfect.
It's weird in a way, you know. You're like you're missing something. Like it's too smooth, you know. It's like kind of like seeing, like it's kind of like comparing a painting to a Photoshop picture. You know, the Photoshop picture is like it's too clean, it's too perfect, it feels weird. Well, when
Yeah.
you look at the painting, you can see the paintbrush, and technically speaking, it's quote unquote default, but no, it's charm. Like you feel like you can run your hand on it and see it with your eyes closed, you know. And now I go full on nerd mode, and when I buy music, it's vinyls. It's old vinyls in record store, and I'm like, yay! And you're shuffling through them with your fingers, and it's like, yay!
Yeah, I love that. That's funny that you went to that analogy of like the Photoshop and painting, because my head was going to sort of a similar thing with photorealism paintings and abstract paintings. Like photorealism, yeah, it's good and it's impressive and whatnot, but abstract's just a little bit more interesting. It just has a, like you say, a quality to it.
Mhm. I can feel
Yeah.
that also in the art I create, you know, because I create art and I create most of it digitally, but not only that, I do some traditional. And actually, my account kind of quote unquote blew up because, you know, I'm not famous or anything, but it kind of started getting attention when I made photorealism paintings with like the papas, and then I did the Ifrit. Um, and when I look at them now, I'm like, yeah, technically it's interesting, you know, like it's like a show of technical capacity in a way.
Yeah.
Um, but there's others drawing that I've made that like I prefer more. Like I did the hand thing where I tried to add texture because I was like that I want to work on texture, you know, and I love that one way more than previous artwork that I've done because
Yeah, for
it has
sure.
there's a feel to it, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Right, I think this is all we've got time for today. I think we're going to revise the horror side of it because there's so much to cover. But Nibwood, where can we find you on the socials?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at the same so Nydelide. But
Mhm.
I am thinking that I'm going to be less on there because recently it's not been that great mentally there because so much drama. So I'm more. I think I'm going to go more on Instagram where you can find me at Stormageddon Stark. I'm sorry, it's going to be very difficult to find.
That's okay. I'll
Um,
put the links in the episode description.
a good idea because try to type storming in the stock. So yeah, but also, you know, people can they can find me on TikTok too. Nydelide. I'm making cosplay. It's kind of cringe, but enjoy.
Oh,
And
I've
yeah,
seen them. They're
people
good.
know they're I'm trying my best. But yeah, people feel free to send me messages. I like interacting with people and talking, as you can
Yeah.
see.
Yeah, go talk. It's just really fun. I'm Alva. You know where I am. I'm always annoying on the timeline. But yeah, next week I don't know what we got next week, but next week we'll see you. Bye.